Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for being here again tonight on another cold night over most of the country. Let's do our check-in with Kaylin and the temperature where she's at. She told me it was 16 degrees, but that the other day or morning, the temperature said that it felt like negative 27. Is that what she said? And that she went outside just to see what that would feel like. And I said, well, how did it feel? And her word was cold. It felt cold. So that is the weather report from Kaylin in Minnesota. It felt cold at negative 27. But then she did add, it felt immediately cold. So I know a lot of you guys are dealing with immediate cold. Thank you for being here right now. We have a lot of fun planned for you guys tonight. The first thing that we're going to do, though, is I wanted to, if you have not seen, or even if you have seen, it's worth watching again, the recent closing arguments in the trial of Jason Chen. Now, it is Jason Chen who was on trial, but really the prosecutor did a good job. Hold on a second. Sorry, I just lost all of my notes. All right. The prosecutor, pardon me, did a good job, and that's the way I'm going to refer to it from now on, is as the murder of Jasmine Pace. And you'll see why that's important. And I think that that is a true way to remember this woman, is to call it the case of Jasmine Pace and the murder of Jasmine Pace. Everywhere that you look for it, it's going to be called Jason Chen, and there he is. But the closing argument, specifically the rebuttal that was done by a DA by the name of Cody Womp, was, I thought, remarkable. And it's not that long. And so I thought, let's go through it and watch it together again tonight. And I can kind of interject and break down what I think that she is doing that is just strategically and from a advocating standpoint, remarkable. It was really, I've been doing this long enough that it's hard for me to get really impressed by attorneys. You see a lot of attorneys, some of them not all that great, some of them less than impressive. And to run across an attorney who really is truly impressive, especially in a moment like this where everything's on the line, cameras are all on her. It's a case that probably the biggest case she's ever handled in her career. I don't know about her career. I'm sure she's got a remarkable career, but I imagine this is one of the biggest cases she's handled. And under all that pressure to deliver the way that she did, I felt it was worth us looking through it again. For the poll, if we run out of time, I want to know what you guys want to hear about most. Here's the things in the hopper. We've got the Alexander brothers. There is apparently new evidence that the prosecution has. They conducted some search warrants and they found, shocker to no one, video evidence. And this video evidence is striking and disturbing. It's the crime. And we don't have it. We're obviously not in possession of it. We're not going to show it. No one's in possession of it but the prosecutor right now. But they've described it in great detail. So we can go into a little bit of that this evening if you want to. ASAP Rocky is on trial right now. That's the other case we can go into. He turned down what I feel is like a gift beyond gifts of a deal right at the 11th hour, said no thank you to the prosecutor, and they're heading to trial. A trial will probably be following closely, and it's a trial that it will be televised. And then finally, Matthew Nilo is a kind of under the radar case out of Massachusetts. He is a lawyer, and the accusations are that nearly, let me get it here, in the mid-2000s, he committed a string of rapes, and they've been able to tie him to that through DNA. And it is this IgG type of DNA, this investigative genealogical genetic profiling that they have used in this case that is very similar to a lot of the arguments that were being raised in the Brian Kohberger case, which was being argued today. And I thought it might be interesting to kind of break down how that's been handled in Massachusetts on the Matthew Nilo case. So those are your three choices: Alexander Brothers, ASAP Rocky, Matthew Nilo. We will put that poll up. Stay, of course, to the very end because we do have some announcements for you. And I wanted to give a very, very special shout out to all of the recovery addict folks who are in the chat tonight. We were overwhelmed with a wave of love today because Scott from Recovery Addict did us a huge solid and gave us a shout out during his stream today. And Scott is a fantastic dude. And he has been, I think we're going to become fast friends. And not to give it all the mystery away, but he is going to be one of our newest interviews on our conversation series. So that's why we met. That's why we had this wonderful conversation. And soon enough, maybe not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, hopefully you'll be seeing that wonderfully edited video from Scott. We had a tremendous conversation. He's got an amazing background and he's got an amazing group of people. And I know he sent a lot of you folks our way. And so we're very, very, very appreciative to all of you for being in the chat tonight. So hit those like buttons. Hello to everybody in the chat, all the new faces, all the familiar faces, Simi and One Love and Jen St. Peter and all you folks. Thank you so much for being here. And CJ, let's jump into this case, okay? Where are we at here? Let me see. Oh, I got to do this again because I don't understand technology. So here is... I'm going to jump right into the rebuttal argument by Cody Womp in the prosecution of Jason Chen for the murder of Jasmine Pace.
Wow. In opening statement, I told you that we would give you the dots and we would help you connect them. Every single fact we mentioned in opening statement, we proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Every single fact we committed to, we proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's what opening statements are for. To give you the evidence you're about to see. And then you heard from Mr. Chen's attorney, who committed to a very specific story. Remember, we didn't just talk about that story, right? We've backed off that story because, that story doesn't work anymore. And we're going to talk about that story. This entire trial has been muddy the waters. It has been muddy the waters to confuse the jury. The opening statement from the defense was meant to confuse you. It was meant to have you thinking.
Just to stop real briefly. Already you realize how she has command of that entire courtroom. This is not a person who's afraid of speaking in front of jurors. This is a person who's owning that space, and I love it. From the volume to her body language to the way that she's abandoned the podium and taken control of the courtroom. But one thing I wanted to point out, and I didn't give you guys, if you haven't followed this case, enough of a background behind it, but do you see that suitcase sitting right there? Have you wondered what that is? If you followed this case, then you know exactly what that is. If you haven't, I'm about to tell you. The allegations here, and proven now, he was found guilty. He has been sentenced to life without parole. The allegations were that he took Jasmine Pace, he shackled her. Her hands were shackled to her ankles, and in that fetal position, he stabbed her 60 times. And she did not die immediately. She bled out and she suffered, and it was horrific. And then he took her body and stuffed it in that suitcase. And that is eventually where her body was discovered, at a different location. And I just wanted to point out that I think it's also tremendous and remarkable on the prosecutor's part that they're not showing a picture of that suitcase. They don't have that picture up on the screen. That might be That might be nice. That might be carry some value to it. But to have that actual suitcase sitting in court while she's giving this closing argument, you can imagine the chills that must have burst out on the arms and necks of the jurors while they're hearing these closing arguments.
About other things, possible defenses that the state disproved. Not only did you not hear evidence of what they said in their opening statement, the state outright disproved it. That's why you don't hear it today. That's why we're not going to go back over the defendant's story. And you had asked about transcripts of opening statements. Let's talk about what we committed to in opening statement as Jason Chen's attorneys. They met on Tinder, wrong? You have text messages. They met on Bumble. Simple thing, but we're just starting with the untruths that the state disproved. They traveled to Chicago together that summer, wrong? End of October. You have text messages that show that he asked her to go to Chicago. You heard that you will see messages where you will see that one of them likes one of them more than the other. Oh, that Jasmine liked him more than he liked her. Wrong. You never saw proof of it. In fact, you have all the messages that they didn't want to show you. They wanted to put them in evidence and then just hope that maybe you'll waste your time reading them. So what did I do? I put them on the screen for you. That weekend before he killed her, he asked her to come over. Oh, she likes him more? No. If you want to waste your time reading the messages, read them. You'll find out that that was not true. What they committed to an opening statement was not true.
Okay, so she's obviously being incredibly aggressive, indignant, perhaps borderline theatrical here. And if you had watched this in a vacuum, and maybe some of you are, you might be like, boy, she's being very aggressive and she's being very abrasive. But here's the thing about it. She's allowed to at this point. And I talk about this a bit. If you're given permission by the jury, you can do damn near anything. She realizes she has read the room. And this is exactly the point in which you can behave this way. And this is exactly the point in which you can be indignant because it calls for it. And what she's doing here is calling out the promises made by the defense in opening statements. If you're a defense attorney, you got to be really careful the checks you write in opening statements. If you don't cash those checks to the jury, then this is exactly what's going to happen to you. You're going to have your ASS handed to you in closing arguments by the prosecution. You better be able to deliver. The defense, absolutely. Prosecution, absolutely. But the defense doesn't have to put their neck out there. They don't have the burden. So if you're going to chirp up and start to say that I'm going to show you this and I'm going to show you that and I'm going to prove this and prove that, and your defense argument, your opening statement isn't all about there isn't enough evidence here. Please hold them to their standard. Please wait to the end and hear what we have to say. But if you're going to make affirmative statements, expect for them to be chopped apart if you don't deliver on that. And that's what she's doing here, is chopping apart even the little things they didn't deliver on. And I think her indignation and her attitude and her demeanor is all well-deserved at this point in the trial. And I think it obviously was very effective with the jurors, but we'll continue.
They drink wine, smoked pot, smoked wax. We didn't hear that just now, did we? Why? Because it's not true. They committed to a story to throw mud at the wall, and it was never true. It was meant to confuse you. And then also, how offensive. The victim drank wine, so he murdered her. The defendant was smoking wax. No proof of it. Zero proof of it. Didn't happen. But let's say that it did. The defendant smoked wax, marijuana, so he murdered her. That is no defense, but it's certainly not a defense when you say it and you never prove it. You committed to this in your opening statement. And by the end of trial, when the jury's no longer confused, you don't want to talk about it anymore. In order to open one of the bottles of wine in the bedroom, Jason had to go to the kitchen and get a kitchen knife to take off that plastic wrapper that goes around the top of the wine bottles. We've seen that knife. Well, we've seen part of it. We'll never know where the other part of it is. We've seen part of it, right? So he was able to get it off the top of the wine bottle. They finish off the bottle. She goes into the kitchen to get another one, and she sees those Tinder messages. The Tinder messages are significant, mostly because that was their adequate provocation. The only adequate provocation you ever heard in this trial was an opening statement, which is not evidence. And then what was the state able to do? Through an expert, who nobody can deny that Mark Hamilton is an expert. He put those Tinder records on the screen and he explained them to you. They are records that cannot be toyed with. They are records that T-Mobile holds regardless of where.
Can you guys hear me? Oh God. Apparently I'm not frozen, but everything is frozen for me on my end. Let me see if I can remedy this. Sorry, guys.
Whether you delete things,
Are we
those are
back?
his Tinder records. And not only did he not have Tinder notifications from that morning, he didn't even have Tinder notifications from November 22nd. That was their adequate provocation. It didn't happen. We know for a fact it didn't happen. So now they stand up here and they say adequate provocation. He was provoked with zero evidence. What the evidence was is that he chased her to the door of that apartment. Miss Paglino Brewer was the state's best witness, and I didn't even call her. I wish I would have. She nailed down our timeline.
This was one of the parts I loved too. The defense called a witness who was a neighbor, and the prosecution had a field day with that witness who was the neighbor. And I have always thought that one of the most powerful things a prosecutor can do, but this can work both ways, defense or prosecution, is use the other side's evidence to your advantage. One of the things I love to do is if the other side had left up an exhibit, let's say, and they felt that exhibit was somehow powerful to them in their questioning of a witness or in their closing arguments, and they would leave that up there, and they wanted to have this effect of it somehow having a resounding effect on the room. I would try to, whenever possible, find a way to make my opening words be about that exhibit. And I would even say, can we please leave that up? Because it sends the message, and I know this is all kind of rhetorical and strategy-wise, but it sends the message to the jury that I'm not afraid of anything they put up. There's no evidence or exhibits they can mark that are going to make me cower or ask me. The last thing I'm going to do is ask, can we please take that down, as if I'm afraid of it and I don't want the jury to see it. Can we please leave that up? I've got a question for this witness about that exact exhibit, and try to find whatever point, yet small or not, to make an example of that. And that's exactly what they did with this witness. And I love that she's pointing that out here, and that she even said, I wished I had called her. Turning the opposition's evidence into your own evidence is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. So this is a lot about her advocacy at this moment, but it's also about her advocacy throughout the trial.
If you didn't already believe the timeline because she sent her mother her location at 2:18, Courtney knows it. Courtney looked at her phone at 2:11 in the morning after she heard a scream of a woman in, quote, distress. kicker. They want you to believe this fabricated story that there's no proof of. But how does Courtney help us? Because she attacked Jason. Again, we're uncommitted to this story now, but let's just go back to their opening statement. She attacked him with a wine bottle, and then subsequently, after he kicked her 98-pound body, according to opening statement, he kicked her 98-pound body to the floor where she fell on wine glasses. She then subsequently came at him with a wine glass and he stabbed her irrationally and very fast 60 times. Not true. Why? Because of Courtney and because of that phone location. Courtney was 2:11 a.m. The phone location to her mom was 2:18, 7 minutes. She screamed. Things happened.
What's another thing you've noticed about this? What is something you've noticed she's not doing as she's reciting facts, as she's giving you exact time signatures, as she's telling you exactly what are the arguments being made by the defense? What is something that she's not doing? Well, one, she doesn't have a PowerPoint going. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but she's certainly not using the PowerPoint as cliff notes for what she's about to argue. And she's not looking at notes. This is all extemporaneous from inside of her mind. And that is very powerful stuff. I mean, that to me, that's something I aspire to do, to be able to speak, to be so familiar with the case and so familiar with your arguments that you just walk away from the podium and speak directly to the jurors without the aid of your notes, without the aid of a PowerPoint. I love PowerPoints. I think they're very powerful and convincing, but if they start to become a crutch and you're just reading off of the PowerPoint, you're not doing yourself any favors either. She knows the info. She knows the case. Future's absolutely right. She knows this case forwards and backwards and probably better than anybody in that courtroom.
She was able to know she was in enough danger that she needed to send her mother her location. It wasn't fast. It wasn't fast at all, and we know that. 2:11 is 7 minutes from 2:18. It wasn't fast. She knew she was in danger. She tried to get out of the door, and Courtney told you that she heard a door slam. Jasmine knew she was in trouble. She had time to use her phone before he started killing her. Made up story.
Pretty great when your closing argument is just their opening statement.
He kicked 98-pound Jasmine Pace, and then he ran away, but he couldn't get the bathroom door closed because of a bath mat. Couldn't close the door on 98-pound Jasmine Pace, so he had to run in his bathroom. He had to run to his bedroom. Jasmine's right there coming at him with this broken glass. In closing, they don't want to talk about the story that they committed to, because the story they committed to was that he killed her in the bedroom. And he gets, quote, and he gets back into his bedroom and Jasmine's right there coming at him with this broken glass. Jason sees the knife and he reacts and he stabs. Okay, we got two problems there. First of all, his own expert, who I wish I would have called, good expert, says that there's something that happened in the bathroom. There is blood spatter on the wall in the bathroom. Like General Moyle showed you, there is blood in the grout in the bathroom. We know she was moved. Why do we know she was moved? Because Dr. Cogswell testified that on the ground in the bedroom where you see all of the blood, which was almost all of the blood that was in her body, because he was only able to get a small vial of blood because it had all leaked out on the carpet, that for that blood to be on the carpet, she had to be laying on her wound side. That's what he said. Because if she was not on her wound side, the blood would have soaked down to the other side of her body, and the medical examiner would have been able to see that. He said she was wound side down. We know she was moved. We know she was moved, and we know there wasn't enough room right there to just simply flip her over. She was killed The stabbing began in the bathroom, and then he drug her into the bedroom where he put her on her side with the wound so she could bleed out. We know that.
Just this is even a comment so much on her advocacy is just the horrific nature of this case. But I mean, think about that they were able to piece that together. I guess that you got to give them credit for that to spell out for the jurors that it's not just what the evidence presents, but it's the story that it builds. To be able to piece together the final moments of this young woman's life involved her being bound, stabbed 60 times while you're bound. I can't imagine something more horrific than that. And then dragged out and laid on your side so that you can bleed out. There's no wonder that they came back with first-degree murder. There's no wonder that they came back with life without parole. And yes, some of that can be attributed to advocacy, and some of that's just the facts, but it's how you take those facts and present them in such a way that leaves such a vivid image, which she is doing a tremendous job of here. Can you tell I'm impressed?
What else is the problem with this? Jason sees the knife and he reacts and he stabs. She's coming after him. He sees the knife and he stabs. The problem is, without question, over and over again, including in writing, our medical examiner says her wounds match her fetal position. It is not true. Trying to confuse you. Trying to throw everything at the wall and hope that it sticks. Really, the worst part of the opening statement is he's scared for what his future entails. But more importantly, the shame that he's going to bring on his family, the shame that comes with everything that he's being accused of today. Manipulative. Selfish. He's scared for what his future entails. He's so scared that he texts on Tinder Victoria at 9:52 with some corny pickup line. He's so scared for his future that he's playing video games with his friends later that day. Don't worry about Jasmine Pace, who's dead in your apartment the entire day until 6 p.m. when you take her to Suck Creek Road. Keep in mind, when he Tinder messages Victoria, Jasmine is dead in his apartment. Uncontested facts. Is this the mindset of someone that just irrationally stabbed a girl 60 times? No. And then he lies over and over and over again. And this is something that General Moyle didn't mention. He lies to Katrina Pace on the phone. He says he hadn't seen her since Saturday. A lie. Then he gets to his parents' house in Nolensville, and he's trying to come up with a story. Not the story you heard Monday, but he's trying to come up with a story. It says, the last time I saw her was the 18th of November. The other note, the other sticky note on the desk says the last time I saw her was the 19th. Trying to get his facts right. He knows he's being looked for. He knows law enforcement's trying to contact him. Why? Because he's got Zach Crawford's number written on a Post-it note. Does he ever say, hey, I killed her because she came at me with a wine bottle? No. He's got Zach Crawford's number written on the Post-it note.
See, I mean, part of, I think, what jurors do is they, like anybody, they say so much of communication has to do with body language, and so much of communication has to do with the tone of your voice, and so much of communication has to do with, do you believe what you're saying? I mean, there's something inherent in us as human beings that we can tell in an instant, just in our gut, if we believe that somebody believes what they are saying. We have that hardwired into our caveman DNA. We know when somebody is telling us something, they don't even believe themselves. And you could not put on this type of a closing and be this impassioned and be this bothered and be this offended if you didn't believe what you were saying, and if you didn't believe it as much as she believes it. And that translates to the jurors. She is the voice of the victim, the voice of the victim's family, and she is, we could be watching this on mute and you would still feel 80% of the passion and indignation that she has for what this man did to this woman, and then what they now did to this jury by trying to convince them otherwise.
He's scared for what his future entails. I'm going to ask y'all to do something for me. It's been a long week. I'm only going to have a couple more requests. When you think about this trial,
this was the part I loved. Sorry, but pay attention to this part.
In 10 or 15 years, you tell somebody about the jury that you had to serve on in Hamilton County. You tell them about the case. I don't want you to remember this case as the case of State of Tennessee versus Jason Chen. The trial of Jason Chen. I don't want you to remember it with the suitcase that the girl left on the side of the road. I want you to remember this trial as the trial for Jasmine Pace. Because we talk a whole lot about criminal defendants. You've heard the name Jason Chen a whole lot since we started jury selection last week. Victims matter. Jasmine Pace is not just some girl listed in an autopsy report. She is not the photos that you have seen. Don't minimize her to a name on an indictment. She is a person. She had family that loved her, that you've heard from this week. She was a friend. She was a granddaughter. Please don't minimize this trial to the trial for him. I'm going to ask that you take all this information, all the notes you've made this week, all of the closing argument information. You're instructed to go back there and begin with first-degree premeditated murder. Go back there together and find him guilty. Please. Thank you.
That last part just gives me chills. And she's absolutely right. I mean, she nails it. Pokemon says I get goosebumps. This gal is fire. She absolutely is. But what she's saying is so true and so often lost. So much of these trials that we watch, we talk about. That's how we refer to them. You know, are you watching Murdoch? Are you watching Sarah Boone? Are you watching Karen Reed? Whatever it is, we're always referring to the defendant. And I'm not trying to get high and mighty here. I get that. I understand it. That's who's on trial. That's part of the drama, that they're a person as well. But so much of the time, prosecutors can do this, defense attorneys can do this. They can lose sight of the real life consequences and that there are people involved here. When this trial is done and this man is sentenced, and he has been, he's going to go off to prison for the rest of his life. And that family, Jasmine Pace's family, will have a hole that will never be repaired for the rest of their lives. And I think that's something that we just continue to need to remind ourselves of, is that this is not just a person in an autopsy report. This was a living human being with hopes and dreams and aspirations and sad days and happy days and family members and everybody who cared about her, and to minimize it to the case of People versus Jason Chen, and that what was the autopsy's findings, what was the manner and cause of death, and forget about this person. We're doing a disservice to them, but I think also to ourselves. And she just does a remarkable job of reminding us. And I should shut up because I can't really add to what she did. I thought it was remarkable. And I think that from a advocacy perspective, to that be your parting words to a jury before you send them off into the jury room, as much as we had chills watching it over a computer screen, you can only imagine how they felt being in the room and then heading into the room to decide the fate of this man. So thank you guys for sitting there and watching this with me. I felt it was important. I know it was something that a lot of you had already seen, but I'm glad that we were able to watch that together. I'll be thinking about that closing for a long time. All right. Have you guys voted? Should we give you a couple of more minutes to vote on our poll here? Again, the cases that we have to talk about are the Alexander brothers. There was some interesting new developments as far as what the prosecutors, what the investigators are letting us know that they've recovered. It includes video evidence. Some of it's very shocking. We're not going to show it to you, but we can tell you about it. Aesop Rocky turned down the gift of a lifetime and decided he's going to head to trial. That's also being prosecuted by John Lewin, a buddy of mine and people that you may have heard of. He prosecuted Robert Durst, and that was highlighted in the Jinx. I don't know if you guys watched or followed that, but for John to be assigned to this case is a little curious to me, so we could get into the whats and whys on that. Or Matthew Nilo is the attorney out of Boston or the Massachusetts area who's accused of 4 sexual assaults from decades ago, and it's all about genealogical DNA evidence. We could get into all of that. All right. Should we call it? Kaylin, do you want to give me the results here on what we're going to go into next? She says yes. 54% Alexander brothers. All right. Alexander brothers it is. So they have been trying their darndest. These are 3 incredibly wealthy brothers. They're 2 twins, and then one who was born a year apart. So they're all essentially the same age. And they have been accused of, in a federal indictment, of conspiracy. I'm going to pull up the indictment here really quick. Conspiracy conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, and then 2 counts with unnamed but specific to 2 victims, 2 counts of sex trafficking, one from 2011 and one from 2016. They have been trying desperately to get out on bail. They've been denied bond several times now. They've offered, I think, over $100 million in property, in bond surety to try to get out, and the judge has said no way. Now, why did the judge say no way? Well, first of all, they're accused of some very serious heavy-duty stuff that could land them in prison for 15 years to life. But more than that, in federal court, the prosecutors will submit what are called detention letters. And it essentially is a letter. It's kind of funny. It's a letter from the prosecutor's office to the court outlining their arguments that they're going to make in court. And they recently, I think it was the end of last week, had these arguments, and they were denied bond again. And some of the stuff that came out of these arguments is absolutely shocking. So first, I will tell you about what was in one of the detention letters that was describing what's in the video. And then I'm going to show you one of the other detention letters where they showed some of their actual text message exchanges that they have with these gentlemen. Because these guys, it's now alleged, even though these crimes were from 2000, as far back as 2011, the government is saying that they have been behaving with reckless abandon and impunity for over 2 decades. They are saying that they've been behaving this way since high school. And what we're talking about when I say behaving is we're talking about the R word. We're talking about drugging women, and sometimes with groups of men, sometimes individually, sometimes by force, assaulting them. And they just happen to have charged 2, but they've interviewed over 40. They keep on referring to dozens of women who don't know each other, who give remarkably similar stories. And these guys, because they're so wealthy and so well connected, have been able to either buy these people off, intimidate them, shame them, embarrass them, whatever it is, to keep this all quiet for decades. Sound familiar, by the way? There's a very wealthy and powerful gentleman in federal court, federal prison jail right now in New York, who's about to be joined by these 3 Alexander brothers named Sean Diddy Combs, with remarkably similar behavior. So the AUSA is not playing around anymore when it comes to these types of cases with very powerful men. So they said that they executed a search warrant, found electronic devices. By the way, they said that these guys had been operating like this up to months before the indictment. So it was ongoing behavior. We're not talking about the federal government reaching back a decade to find some bad stuff that they did a while ago, but they've now become reformed men. This is apparently behavior they had been participating in up to months before their indictments. They seized a bunch of electronic devices. They found photos and videos that depict, quote, Oren and Alon. So their names are Alon, Oren, and Tal, all Alexander. Oren and Alon and several third parties, meaning other men that aren't being identified or indicted at this time, recording or photographing themselves with women in states of intoxication in undress. In multiple videos, I'm quoting from the letter here, the women appear initially unaware that they were being recorded and became upset and attempted to hide or flee from the camera after realizing that they were being filmed. Okay, already we're talking about videotape corroborating what some of these women are going to claim and testify to in court. Now, recording someone without their knowledge is bad enough, but are we now to the level of R word? Are we to the level of sexual assault? I don't know. Just buckle up and stay tuned. That goes on to say that Alon and Oren and other men engaged in sexual contact with women, quote, who are visibly under the influence of alcohol or other substances. In some cases, at least one of the brothers and another man, quote, physically manipulated the women's bodies in order to have sex with them while the women did not actively participate in the sexual activity or turned away. They caught it on tape. Now, that is awful. Period. End of story. But why is it tremendously significant in a case like this? Because these cases, many times, all become about he said, she said. We're wealthy. We're well connected. These women are after money. This is extortion. They're all working with each other. Of course, they're trying to take down powerful men, and on and on and on and on and on. And many times these types of crimes are committed in situations where there is nothing to corroborate it. Many times these are allegations from a long time ago. Physical evidence, if it ever existed, no longer exists. Eyewitnesses may not exist, may not be willing to come forward. This is a lot of the issues that they're running into in the Sean Diddy Combs case. But they've got videotape now. How do you say they're making this up? How do you call this a he said, she said when you've got videotape of it? Most times these crimes are committed in private, behind closed doors, on purpose. These guys are so full of themselves that they recorded it. They wanted to watch it. And some of what's recorded are the women that are going to testify. This case went from incredibly awful to very, very worse for these men. And you can see why now the judge no judge on earth is going to let them out with this kind of evidence, with their ability to flee on top of the just wake of devastation and hurt and victims that they've left behind them for decades, acting with impunity. And apparently their behavior in court is a lot like this. Apparently their behavior in court is a lot of not seeming entirely affected by all of this. And I was asked about that. You know, what do you make of their behavior? What do you make of the idea that these guys just don't seem all that bothered by it? They seem to have kind of a, we've got this under control attitude. Adler Lowe says they need to be behind bars for many years. They watch out. You're going to get your wish, Alder. I think it's absolutely going to happen. Again, you know, these are allegations. We're going to have to see how it works out. We're going to see what's proven in court. I could be having a very different conversation if all of this doesn't actually come to fruition. But I think why we're seeing this behavior from them is they have let this lifestyle for so long. They have been able to buy themselves out of it. They have, if they mistreated someone, I mean, even some of what's in the indictment talks about that many times after an assault would take place, they would pour gifts upon some of these women. You know, let them go on a shopping spree, invite them to another extravagant vacation, invite them to another party with access to celebrities and music stars and sports figures and all of the access that all of them had craved and wanted. And many times that would shut people up. Maybe many times that would make people forget. Many times that would intimidate people because they feel like, look at how connected and powerful this person is. How am I possibly going to convince anyone to do anything about what was done to me? And when that goes on for so long, and all you've got to do when you've offended someone or done something wrong is throw money at the problem, or get your rich and powerful friends to throw money at it, or get your rich and powerful friends to intimidate these people, you feel that you're untouchable. And I think that these guys still feel that they're untouchable. That's why I think this is going squarely to a trial. They are not going to be offered anything that they can live with, to be first off, by the government. The government is looking to make an example out of these gentlemen. And I don't think they're looking for an offer. I think that they feel they're going to buy the best attorneys on the planet and that they're going to throw enough money, and they've got the money. They're going to throw enough money at this problem and they will eventually walk. Oh, CJ's got a question. Good, because I need a break because I keep on yelling at everybody tonight. She says, I'm okay with it, but can you explain why federal charges, why the federal nexus? Great question. First, a purely functional answer and then a strategic answer. First, they are alleged to have trafficked people across state lines. So some of these alleged assaults took place in New York and the Hamptons. They lived in Florida. Some of those took place there. Some of them took place internationally. And many times these women were being flown internationally and being trafficked. So those are federal charges and why they gain jurisdiction over it. But the other reason why is when you charge conspiracy, you can charge ongoing conduct, and you can charge a ongoing criminal enterprise, and that allows you to reach back further in time and avoid some perhaps possible statute of limitations issues. So think about it like a mob case almost. They can reach back many, many years in a mob case when it's an ongoing criminal enterprise, which is exactly how they're laying this out and exactly how they laid it out with Diddy. It's the same playbook. They're treating these like mob cases. And if you think about it like that, you'll understand why the federal government's getting involved and why they're handling the way that they did. I promised you, though, that I was also going to show you some of the highlights or lowlights, however you want to consider them, of the text messages taking place between these women. And I'm not even going to read you all of it because, quite frankly, I don't want to have these words come out of my mouth. But I'll show some of it to you, and you can read it, and then I'll give you some highlights. But this is in one of the detention letters where they're showing the. Let me see if I can make myself smaller here. They are showing the text messages that have been received from some of the phones. And one of the things I want to point out is that you will see they'll identify, like here, Oren or Alon, when it's, pardon me, one of the defendants, but then they'll just identify by male 1, male 2, when it's somebody else. And again, we've talked about that. Where do you think those guys are? Do you think that the government just forgot about them and doesn't want to do anything with them? Where they are is cooperating with the government. So all of these unidentified co-conspirators are going to be taking the stand for the government. They've already, I imagine, testified at a grand jury. They've already been part of the underlying evidence. These guys are going to come forward and say exactly what this stuff was that was going on. But again, if you could read some of this, and I tried to read this through the lens of how will the defense categorize it, and how will the defense say, listen, these are guys, having dirty talk. These are guys just talking about, meeting women, and yes, it's awful, and yes, it's objectifying, and yes, it's, talk that they would never want their wives to hear about. By the way, they are married. But, it's not a crime. Well, that's until you get into things like this. These comments. This was an exchange between a male, unidentified male, and Tall. I just need to handle drugs. Yes. I don't want X around too much, referring to ecstasy. Nothing gets done with that. Coke, shrooms, and G. And the government has outlined that they believe that G is a reference to GHB, which we all know to be a drug used in date R. That is commonly used to render people incapacitated and unable to give consent. And then finally, and this was the kicker, X makes the girls want to chase the effing party. So right here, they're talking about procuring drugs for the purpose of getting these women to behave the way that they want them to behave. Not much wiggle room to be found in that. Will the defense try to do something with it? Of course they will. But a lot of these text messages are beyond just kind of, horrible, dirty talk. A lot of it steps into the realm of what I think can be provable to showing that they, the intention of procuring this women was for sex trafficking. Again, I'm embarrassing myself to try to find the ones that I can actually read to you guys. But here's another exchange that I think, however the defense wants to paint this, it's still not going to look good for them in court. But this is, again, Oren speaking to an unidentified male, just trying to make sure I get max returns, speaking about the women. Was going to come for that Sunday night tax and make sure all girls make quota. LOL, the whole $500 on a flight, no free rides under my watch. That's more than most of us ever spent on girls. Just want to make sure we get a good ROI, or meaning return on their investment. So very, very, at the very least, you could possibly say that they were treating these women as prostitutes, and that still is what would be considered trafficking. And at the very most, you can say that they're treating them as absolute commodities and victims, and it's horrible, horrible stuff. So this case, it's going to be a really huge case. Surviving the Survivor, STS, has been doing real yeoman's work on this. If you want to kind of catch up, they've been covering it a lot because these brothers came from Florida. But it's going to be a very big case, and it's right on line of what we're seeing with these other cases with Sean Diddy Combs and some of these other people who are being taken out, but especially with the federal government involvement. The feds don't mess around. They absolutely don't. When they come, they bring receipts. They absolutely do. All right. We have a few minutes left. Courtroom Confidential, do you think the One Brothers high school yearbook quote can be used to show how far back this goes? I think the government, great question, Lee. What she's asking about is that there was a quote apparently from one of them talking about, yeah, this is it. Riding my first quote choo-choo train. Okay. So the reference here is an awful reference to a train. I don't know how to say this without embarrassing myself, but a train being run on women, meaning multiple men with a woman, and it's a reference to sexual assault. Okay. Here's the thing on that. One, I think the government needs to be very careful how cute they want to get about this and how far back they want to go, because they could lose credibility if they can't back this up. If there is some reasonable explanation for this type of behavior and type of discussion back during the time they were in high school. And they don't want to run into that kind of trouble. That's exactly what got them into trouble in the Weinstein case in New York, and why he's getting a retrial is they went too far back and too broad. But if these guys were to take the stand, they were to try to testify that they've never talked this way, never done this, never exploited women, never taken part in any of this stuff, absolutely, they're going to get blown up with these types of things on cross-examination. So I imagine the government will save a lot of it for cross-examination. Yeah, buckle up on that one. It's going to be a crazy case. All right, guys. We're running to the end of the hour here. We'll have to save Aesop, Rocky, and Matthew Nilo for another day, but we will be covering it on Friday. Before I let you go, I wanted to just show you some of the work that we have done on the website, because I get a lot of questions from people about, where can I sign up for the membership program? And I do an awful job of telling people where to look. Let me see if I can do this better here. We have now made it easy that everything that you're going to want to do is on the website. So if you want to learn about our membership program, which we put a lot of work into, you just click on here on Become a Member. It'll shoot you right over to this wonderful video that I did forever ago, but talk about all the benefits of the membership. If you want to know about merchandise, you click on our shop button and you'll get all of that. And don't think you guys are escaping this. If you want to leave us a voice message, you click on this, click a button, start recording, leave us a voice message. And when we do our Sunday Funday shows, you can hear all the wonderful voice messages being left from all over the world. What I love about it too is we've got a real good collection of accents coming in. We've got from the South to England and everywhere in between, of people leaving us messages all over the world. It reminds us of what a wonderful international this is. So I'm not going to let you guys off the hook. I know who you are. I know the ones who are still trying to work up the courage to leave us a message. Leave us a message. Again, thank you, and welcome to the recovery for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of the community. So on Monday, if you missed it, we had our latest conversation with Paul from Reporting Live from My Sofa. It was a really great conversation that we had with Paul. He's a tremendous guy, really interesting backstory, and he's just a pleasure to speak with. So check that out. Stay tuned for our latest Friday episode. Oh, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate that. Scott's in the chat. Thank you, sir. And check out our Friday episode where we wrap everything up. Stuff that we may not have had the chance to get to tonight. We'll talk about it on Friday for sure. Next Monday, for our next conversation series, we sat down with Karen and Chris McDonough from the Interview Room. Talk about a background, talk about the bona fides to be able to talk about investigation of true crime. Chris and Karen really, really have it. So that will premiere on Monday, January 27th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Who do you want to hear from next? I've already kind of given you a sneak preview as to who's going to be coming up after that. But if you guys got other suggestions, please let us know. Mimi D, thank you so much for becoming a member. And I wanted to thank our members that we weren't able to thank since last week. And that is Julie Hopkins, Denise R, Kathy Sue, Hookie LA, Jill Argos, Winsome Dawes, Janie Garza, Elaine S, Jacqueline Jackson. May the force blah, blah, blah be with you. Kay Schmidt, Carolyn Montana Girl, Moon Goddess, Scorpion, One Love, Deb O Raw F, and Ohio Palm Mom. You guys are killing me with the names that I got to get through all of them. But thank you all so much. This has been another wonderful Wednesday Night Live from all of you. And I will be speaking to you all soon. Take care, everybody. Stay warm.